with me today, I have Ed Kirwan. Ed has one of my favorite websites that I've seen in a long time. His opening statement on this website talks about storytelling and the formats in which we connect with people. But that's not the reason we're here today. Today, we're here to talk about Empathy Week. Ed, firstly, thank you for joining us here on Fuse.
Thank you, Dan. Lovely to be here.
So, Ed, let's start at that famous beginning. Empathy Week, how did it come about? What inspired you to create it?
I always struggle to put this into a short journey because it's not. And I think, firstly, people think that I set out purposefully to do this, and it was an idea from the start, and it really wasn't. If you go back 6-7 years, I was a teacher in North London, straight out of university, through a program called Teach First, which some people around the world will recognize, whether it's Teach for America, Teach for Vietnam. There's lots of different versions of it, but essentially you're thrown into the education system on your own as a teacher with 6 weeks training, and you're given your own classes. So you're not shadowing, they are your classes, and it's a baptism of fire, and teaching is just an unbelievable job. You'll hear that I'm still in London based on some of the sirens that are going past, but it's an amazing place. And unfortunately, there is also a lot of deprivation. There's students in London where they don't get access to opportunities, and that was a big culture shock for me in a way. Seeing young people come into school and understanding that their lives are very different back at home. Obviously, you get every student in the same class and you think, oh, they have a similar life. But the reality is there's varying differences. And I essentially taught for 3 years, and I was a science teacher. I was a chemistry teacher, and I taught from ages 11 to 18. And I learned very quickly that actually the best way to get my students to do well or to succeed or to have some sort of ownership in the classroom of their own studies was to deploy empathy. And I never called it empathy at the time. I never even thought of it as empathy, but it was asking a student who maybe has just hit someone in a class whilst you've got a Bunsen burner going and there's all sorts of carnage going on. You send them outside to cool off and you say, you don't shout at them, and instead you say, what's going on? Have you had breakfast? How's mum? What's going on? And they're expecting to be shouted at, and all of a sudden you care, but you actually care, and you check up on them. And you may 2 months down the line say, how's your brother doing at school? And they know that you care. And I realized I stepped away from teaching. I essentially burnt out. And then in those 3.5 years from leaving teaching to now, or leaving the classroom to now, I did a lot of filmmaking around homelessness, around social issues, which is what I kind of sparked the fire in my students with, to get them to care about the world and care about other people as well as themselves. And I got to a certain point where I was in India. I actually went to the Homeless World Cup, which is a fascinating charity and tournament each year. And I was in Mexico, and it was there that I met the Indian team. And the Homeless World Cup is essentially 50 teams from across the world that bring people, young adults who have experienced homelessness or social exclusion, and they simply just play football in a tournament for a week. And it's there that I met the Indian team, who were brought by an organisation and charity called Slum Soccer. And I went out there to actually help them develop teaching resources, leadership material surrounding their program. And that's when all of my experiences came together. And I said, I can now use a camera, I can produce films, and I have a really good understanding of education. What do teachers need? What do students need? And that's where Empathy Week was born, which was this idea that we were going to film 5 films each year, and we'll surround them with lesson plans and activities and deliver them to schools so that young people can actually see beyond their 1 kilometre radius that they think is their world and is the world, and actually see beyond that, experience lives of people that they would otherwise never ever meet, but not just see their context, but also reflect that context back on their own life. And you get kids, it's amazing when you watch them and you see, oh, I'm a bit like that, and I'm a bit like that. Now we've got children in London, children in America, children in Vietnam, relating themselves, maybe not even to another child, to an adult in India, saying, oh, I can see a bit of myself in that. And the real magic is that if we can do this year on year, a child that is 5 years old this year, by the time they're 18 and they leave school and they go into the working world, if they take part in Empathy Week every year, they'll have experienced 65 different people's life stories. And how do we get over our, racial inequality, gender inequality? In the UK at the moment, there's a big movement around gender inequality and sexual harassment based on the woman Sarah who died a couple of weeks ago. Actually, 3 roads away was her last seen location from where I am now. And if we can train young people not just on those issues, but on empathy generally, which is for us creating space for someone else to express themselves as they are. It's empathy is not compassion. It's not kindness. They're related. It's neutral. Empathy is neutral. It's simply me as you are now trying to understand myself. You're trying to understand me. It's this neutrality of like understanding my perspectives, my feelings and emotions. And if you can do that, well, then it leads to kindness and compassion, which is centered around what the person needs. So that is a very, very long, not short introduction to what Empathy Week is, how it came about, and what it tried to do. But yeah, that's where we're at the moment.
Empathy is one of the things that I look at as the fundamentals of me as a human being. If I can't start from there, if I can't work from there, what am I doing? I ignore work or private life, personal life. It's the beginning of everything dealing and engaging with anyone else. Going back to that classic statement of walking a mile in someone else's shoes, where I was looking at what you were doing with this project and the empathy and the understanding of other people's journeys and their trials, their tribulations, their challenges. It reminded me that when I went to school, which is a while ago, I won't play guess how old Dan is. I've done it before. It didn't end well.
It didn't end well.
The takeaway that my class had was we were learning about opportunity and wealth gap and citizens and roadblocks to healthy living, etc. And the one takeaway that my class had was in this deprived area, they had televisions. It was like, wow, if that's the number one takeaway from my class, from our teacher, and I'm not criticizing my teacher, but if that is the number one takeaway, oh, they have televisions. There's something wrong in the way that class was taught, because it was only a few weeks ago I was talking to my friend about this, and she said, do you remember that class? They had televisions. And I'm like, yeah, there's the internet now as well, but none of that is truly relevant to people and their lives. So looking at Empathy Week, PRCA came on board and supported this year. I'm super proud that PRCA did. What's it mean to you as someone who's had the vision for this project and it fell in place? What's it mean to you when you have not only individuals supporting you or educational organizations and the people that you hope to reach support the project, but actually organizations external to what you do as a core coming on board, raising awareness, helping the organization in whatever shape that may take?
It's fundamental, isn't it? I think everyone can sell themselves and everyone can say what they're doing is great. But when you hear it from someone else, when someone else says, oh, you should speak to that person, or, you should maybe speak to that business, when, testimonials, they're so important. And I know this isn't a testimonial, but it is in a way. It's an organization getting behind another organization and saying, look, what these people are doing is great and it's worth your time. And that might not, lead to anything immediately, but 3 years down the line, someone might go, oh yeah, no, I've heard of Empathy Week. Or they might become a parent all of a sudden whose child is now in school that isn't at the moment, and they go, actually, I would like my child to do that. And it's crucial. I have to actually, call out here Youth Sport Trust, which is a national UK charity, and their CEO Alison Oliver. And I was put in touch through a person. You know how it works. You meet someone that introduces you to someone else, and I had not done anything at this stage. I hadn't even been to India. I'd had the idea, And I managed to meet her for a coffee in a very wet, rainy London day. And we had half an hour of coffee. And she just said to me, Ed, keep me updated. I can see you're passionate. I can see what you're trying to do and achieve. And we'll try and support you if we can. And 6 months later, when I came back from India, they said, great, we're going to support you and we'll help push it out to all our schools that are working with us. And that then led to another lead in another organization. And the thing is that there's mutual benefit in all these things. At first, I used to think, why are people helping? But actually, collaboration is where everything is at. It's how the world moves around. And for an organization like PRCA to come on and say, look, we're going to put Empathy Week on the front page of our website, for no reason other than they wanted to help us and they believe in what we're doing. And I think that's more and more important as we go through into this hopefully post COVID world, is this idea that, values aligned organizations support each other just because they can and just because they should and for no other reason. There doesn't need to be all this paperwork and things behind it and, NDAs, and I've just said, about not using acronyms, but, non-disclosure agreements and, all of these legal things, forms around simply just helping. And I think that's what happened here. It was just spoke to a few members of the team. They said, we love it and we're going to help. And you can't put a value on that, really.
And also referring to something that from a conversation we were having before we hit record, but almost by osmosis, people came on board, and that process of one person, the next person, gravitating towards this, it was relatively organic. And we see so many organizations struggle, and I'm sure there have been moments of struggle where you've been banging your head against a brick wall, and they have probably been many hours believing in this, knowing that there are these opportunities and trying to get the awareness out there. But it's nice to see human kindness stepping in and making a stand to go, we align with this, we believe in this, we think this should breathe, this should have an opportunity to be out there. Ed, we've got a couple of clips that we're going to play from Pete's video, and it's incredibly powerful as a lot of the videos that you've worked on are.
Pete talks about giving mental health a kick and his reaction to his father's death and him taking his own life and how they've done that. And I think there's a few clips of his mother talking also about, what would I say to Paul? Or I asked the question, what would you say to Paul? And she said, it's right at the end of this bit. It's like, I tell him I love him. I tell him that the lies that depression told you weren't true. I think there's a really powerful element there.
Caring, enthusiastic, passionate. He was silly at times as well. He was an amazing listener. Dad would sit there in a conversation and pay such an interest in you as a person. I think, mate, empathy for him, why is it important? Everyone's come from their own background, everyone has their own story. Dad just took everyone at face value. Didn't matter where you came from. That was a huge part of what Dad, believed in massively.
How does it make you feel, and as a human being, when people trust you with these stories?
What a question that is. You have to be vulnerable yourself first before anyone can be vulnerable with you. And I think as time goes on, it's easier for me to build trust because I have more of a portfolio of what I've done. But let me use Pete as an example. As we're playing these clips, Pete was put in touch with me by by a mutual friend, and all I had to go off was Pete's lost his dad in February, and this was probably end of April, May, so 2 months before. And I reached out to him, and he'd done a video as well, and we went for a coffee. And it sounds so simple, but the most important bit about filmmaking and telling a story, it doesn't matter what bloody camera you have, it doesn't matter the settings and all of that stuff. The power in the story is in the relationship you have. And there's a huge amount of pressure I feel, though I've got better at dealing with it, of telling someone's story, because you can hear it. Pete's film's 10 minutes long, but I spent days with him, days and days, and hours of interviews.
He was a very, very talented sportsman. I guess the way I've been able to decompress and that feeling of happiness coming back and almost feeling Dad alongside me is in those moments where I'm playing. There's a competitiveness with it inside me where I feel like I can give mental health a little bit of a kick. It's just a natural way in which I feel I can, act through him. And it doesn't mean that Dad's life was a waste, basically.
That's the other thing as well, is people say to me, and I know other filmmakers and other videographers who will say, when they're interviewing someone, they'll say, if you can repeat the question back to me, and if you can do this, so it's easier to edit. And I understand that, but I don't do that. I just let them speak. And and if it's more annoying for me to edit, of course it is, but it's more natural. And then it's interesting. You never get the golden clips. You never get the golden nuggets of what people are saying in the first 10 minutes. They're usually in the last 10 minutes, because you've built people into a rhythm of speaking and opened, and you're there to listen.
I tell him I love him so dearly. I tell him I understand, because I wouldn't want him to feel he'd let me down, or I would tell him I totally understand why you've done it. And the lies that depression told him weren't true, and that he was one of life's unique individuals who gave so much and expected so little in return, that he didn't deserve that ending, and that he'll never be replaced at all. He said the two most important things in life were to love and to be loved. That's what he said.
People always say to me, oh, do you need to go? I block off my whole day for maybe a 2-hour interview, because it doesn't matter if I need to. I've even, Habib, another person I filmed, who was about an hour and 15 minutes across London from me. One day I got there in summer and he just had a bad day and he didn't want to film. And I just trekked all of my stuff on the tube, been wearing a mask for an hour and a half or whatever. And I was just like gutted. But we then just stood outside and he had a smoke and we just caught up. And then the next time I interviewed him, it, couldn't stop him talking. It's all about this human relationship and trust. And in order to do that, you have to be honest and open. And I'm so open with what I'm doing. This is what I want to achieve. This is why I want your story to be told. And I don't have any, financial benefit for you of this, apart from I just really want to tell your story and it be used to impact other people. And when you have a clear purpose and a clear, authentic reason, and for no one else to doubt you, and you can talk about your life as well, just like, you know, we were having before this conversation, you know, just finding out about each other a bit. We didn't need to do that, but we did, and it means the conversation now, I feel like I know you already, and I trust you to tell my story. And it's the same thing, you know, you're in the position I'm usually in, of like asking questions and delving into someone else, but you've told me about yourself, and so I do that as well, and I say, you know, this is what I used to. And you know, when I was filming the first series in India, there's one of the films, Pankaj, and you can watch the 2020 films on YouTube. They're free to access. Pankaj, I spent probably 2 months every day on the back of his bike, but we only filmed one interview of like 3 or 4 hours. But because we become so close, so unfortunately for filmmaking, storytelling, and empathy in general, to get good at empathy, to develop your empathic muscles, to flex them, to make them stronger, it's time, and you need to spend time with people, and that is what the most important and rich commodity there is, because we're all time poor, and we want things, we want instant gratification. But to get those 10 minutes of like understanding someone and to create this pure story, you have to give your time to them, and you could be listening to them for hours and hours and hours, but keeping that focus and understanding those emotions.
Ed, it's a real privilege for me to talk to you. It's a real privilege for me to hear what you have to say. I want the opportunity for other people to understand more about you and Empathy Week. For them to do that, where could they find more information?
So you can head to the Empathy Week website, which is www.empathy-week.com. On Twitter, we are at The Empathy Week, and on Instagram, we're at Empathy Week, and Facebook, Empathy Week. And then for me, I'm at Ed Kirwan, that's Kirwan, on everything. I use LinkedIn a lot, I use Twitter a lot, Instagram not so much, but I think that's probably a good thing. And I'm just always keen to hear your thoughts and ideas, and I think just to finish on a point that I want to make is that everyone has a story, and everyone thinks their own life is boring. You know, if you spoke to Barack Obama, he probably thinks his own life is boring because he has habits and routines, but everyone else thinks his life's amazing. And the important thing about that is that you have a story that's worth telling to someone else, and you can inspire someone else as well. And I always say that to people, that your life is interesting and you have a lot of inspiration to give other people. So don't shy away from being your authentic self, and don't shy away from telling your own story to other people as well.